Did it come through?
Yes, thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, it is noon. I see we still got a lot of people kind of rolling in, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started as just for the interest of time. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our event today through the Emerging Professionals Program, or EPP. My name is Jerry Stone. I'm the Healthcare Facilities Manager of Nebraska Medicine and also a current EPP president. Before we get started with our event, I do want to just take a brief minute to talk about some of the things you can do as part of the EPP. So I guess, do we have that on the next slide, or?
I don't believe so.
Oh, we don't have it there. That's fine.
And I just stopped sharing in case you wanted to pull something up. And then
Yeah, my apologies. I was thinking we had it as the first slide there. So Kelsey, do you have that slide, or?
I don't. I didn't happen to receive anything from Callie.
Okay, hold on just a second then. Let me see if I can share this. Okay, can you guys see my screen here?
Yes.
You can see the presentation, right? Or the EPP.
Yeah, you're good, Jerry.
Yeah, it's like appearing in 3 different screens on my, it says like, what's going on? Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about, as members of EPP, what you can expect. And hopefully we got some new people on that are not current members, but maybe have been invited by someone else that they know. If you are a member of EPP, you will get the notifications for future presentations, speakers, and events like the one we have today. You'll receive our monthly newsletter, keep you up to date with the said events and any other EPP updates. You also have opportunities to volunteer in the community and do some activities there, or any of these other events and activities that we've got. So in order to join EPP, you can join at the link below, www.unmc.edu/EPP. You can email our leadership team, and you can also follow our Now channel. So you should definitely follow our Now channel. We're definitely trying to bolster that and make it a great thing there. So I am sorry now. I will stop sharing and give it back to Christine. Sorry about that there. I will, so before we get started, I will just give a brief introduction for Christine here. So Christine is our Senior Organizational Development Consultant and Executive Coach. During this presentation, she's going to share 3 key components of demonstrating leadership presence. As an executive coach and leadership development consultant, Christine has challenged hundreds of clients, including myself, to find their authentic leadership presence through developing a deep sense of self-awareness, cultivating a growth mindset, and adopting a relentless bias for action. So I'm really excited to see this presentation today. I know that's going to be great. We've had Christine on here a few times, I think, over the course of the years with the EPP. And like I said, I've worked with Christine as well. So really excited for this. Christine, you can take it away. Christine, you're on mute, actually.
There we go. That's such a tricky move for a presenter. Man, can you hear me now? Okay, good. All right. All right. Well, I am really thrilled to be here with all of you today, and just happy that you're here. I was going to present last week. I had we'll call it a bit of a cold, even though it was more than that. And so I might cough and sniffle a little bit today, but hopefully I will be at my best today for you. But thank you for being here and being flexible with this presentation and the date and time. As Jerry said, my name is Christine Mixon, and it is really nice to see all of your faces. I will ask you if you could be on camera for me, turn on those cameras if you don't already have them on. I love to see faces. This is going to be really interactive. I've got a lot of questions that I'm going to pose to this group. And I know it's hard in a big group like this to be brave and kind of shout out answers or participate, but I'm going to ask you to do that, to be brave and courageous today and participate with me. So turn those cameras on if you can. Don't do what I did, unmute if you want to speak, and we'll just keep this really interactive. You know, at the end of my presentation, I am going to try to save a few minutes for questions. I always love to hear from my audiences when I present and hear what you have to say and questions you might have. So you can feel free to interrupt me along the way though, too, even though I'll save some time at the end for questions. You know, if you want to interrupt me, go ahead and do that. Don't be shy about that. I don't mind. We'll keep this fun and informal. And then if you don't want to interrupt me and you want to answer a question into the chat, I know that Kelsey has agreed, and I think Jerry will be helping in the background too, to just monitor the chat for me if some relevant questions come in along the way, and then I can stop and address them for you. But I will save a couple minutes at the end for questions. And I also want to hear your insights and takeaways. So I have a lot to share with you today, and I would love to hear from just a few of you at the end. What is one or two things that you are going to take with you and maybe practice or do differently or change or embrace or try on for size? That always gives me such a charge to hear from my groups at the end of my presentations, to hear what their key insights or takeaways are. So that is my challenge to you, to be thinking about those over the next hour so that when I do ask that at the end, you'll have plenty to offer. So as I said, my name is Christine Mixon, and at Nebraska Medicine, I am a senior organizational development consultant and executive coach, which is kind of a mouthful, as Jerry had to say too when he was introducing me. What that means is that I have the absolute privilege, and I do consider it a privilege, of growing extraordinary leaders at Nebraska Medicine. And how do I do this? Well, I do this through facilitating a lot of different leadership programs. I do a lot of executive coaching and really working with our leaders and a lot of our senior leaders, our chiefs and VPs, on succession planning. So that's really what my role is all about. I was invited to speak with you today, and this audience is familiar to me because, as Jerry said, I spoke to this group a couple of years ago. But this time they asked me to do a topic regarding professional development, and I chose leadership presence. Leadership presence. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. So, you know, I wanted to start out just getting you involved right out of the gate. I promised you would be interactive, and here we go already. I have a question I'd like you to think about for a couple seconds, and then I want you to enter who pops into your mind into the chat. And then I'll ask Kelsey to kind of monitor what's coming through and give me just maybe a sampling of what's coming through. Here's the question. When you think of people that have leadership presence, who do you think of? Think about who's out there that you just think, you know, they've got a lot of leadership presence when they show up, when they talk, when they present. Who do you think of? Go ahead and think about that for just a moment and start to enter some answers into the chat. And as they roll in, Kelsey, maybe just kind of give me a sampling.
Yes, so we have Chancellor Gold, Sue Nuss, Michelle Obama, Corey Shaw, Dr. Linder, Dr. Rupp, Frank Venuto. Lots of Dr. Rupps coming in.
Very good. Very good. Wow, they would be very flattered. Yes, this is recorded, so maybe I'll shoot them a note and say you should really watch this EPP presentation. Your name came up. They'd be flattered. Anybody, anything else coming through?
Michelle Schultz.
Oh, she went on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Michelle Schulte, Corey Shaw. Yeah.
Did anybody, Kelsey, I'm curious, did anybody enter in, and it's okay if they didn't, but I'm just curious, anybody who's not like what I'll call famous, you know, we kind of have our famous people here like Corey Shaw and Dr. Linder. Did anybody enter like my best friend or mom, right? That kind of thing. I'm just curious, anybody at all?
No, we didn't have anyone do that.
Oh, okay, well, I'm with you. If I were to ask that question, I probably would have entered, we'll call them more like high profile people into the chat as well, as that sounds like all of you did. And, you know, when I think about, if I were to go deeper, kind of peel back the onion a bit, I could probably name a lot of people in my life who aren't leaders at all. They don't have a title. They don't have like a fancy title or credentials or anything like that, but they have a lot of presence. I actually do think about like my best friend. I think about my dad. It's interesting. So, you know, when you think about leadership presence, the truth is you don't need a fancy leadership title to have leadership presence. So when I use the word, just to level set, leadership today, I'm not going to be referring to leadership as a title, but rather a mindset. Because I do believe, and I've worked with leaders, thousands of leaders over the last many years. I don't want to sound old, so I'll just say many years. And I've realized that leadership is not at all a title. It is a mindset that can be cultivated, it can be grown, it can be developed with practice. In fact, I would dare to say that leadership is far more about people wanting to follow you because they trust you and they trust your intent and what you're all about than it is or will ever be about a title. So, what in fact is leadership presence? How do we want to define it for our session today? Well, here's one way to define it. It's about letting the most powerful version of yourself shine through. I love the simplicity and the power behind that. Leadership expert Sylvia Hewlett offers even another definition. She defines it as a combination of gravitas, I love that word, communication, and appearance. And she's, by the way, defining appearance not so much as how we look, as how we present ourselves, by the way. And she says that together these elements form impressions of trustworthiness, competence, and authenticity. So here's the funny thing about humans. Well, there's so many funny things about humans, but one of them is, and it's fascinating, is that we are biologically hardwired to scan our environment for threats. I mean, think about it. It's very primitive, right? It's very evolutionary. We scan our environment for threats, and we do this very quickly. And we quickly form impressions about others around us based on very little information. In fact, according to social psychologist and author, whom I know many of you are familiar with, Amy Cuddy, Amy Cuddy says, people quickly answer 2 questions about you in just a few seconds within meeting you. Maybe, if we're being gracious, a few minutes. And these are the 2 questions. Can I trust this person? And can I respect this person? And to influence others, if you really think about it, to truly have what I'm referring to as leadership presence, you need people to be able to answer affirmatively to these 2 questions because they need to trust you and see you as competent, as trustworthy, as authentic. So that's a lot to unwrap. You know, where do you even start? That's a lot to unwrap. And I suggest that we start at the beginning, which is all about self or self-awareness. Then I suggest we examine our mindset, or what I'm going to refer to today as growth mindset. And then we're going to end today with how we show up, which is best with a bias for action. Woody Allen once said, and I love this, 80% of success is just showing up. I love that. So if we just said that leadership presence is about letting the most powerful version of yourself shine through, does that not then imply that one must know oneself first? So let's start there. You know, I was preparing for this presentation today, and I wanted to pull a few of my favorite quotes about self-awareness and share them with you. I'm going to give you just 15 seconds or so. Just read through those, pick your favorite. I have a favorite, I'll share mine, but go ahead and read through those and see what you think. My favorite is actually that second one. I think it's incredibly profound. The most fundamental harm we can do to ourselves is to remain ignorant by not having the courage and the respect to look at ourselves honestly. Having that self-awareness means that you have a clear recognition of who you are. This includes your strengths and your weaknesses, your thoughts and your beliefs, your emotions and your motivations. And I'm going to pause right now. Can you all hear me okay? I got a little message saying my internet was unstable. Can you all still hear me? Okay, good. So that's, you know, one aspect of self-awareness is to look internally, but another aspect of self-awareness that you might not think about is what you see here. And having self-awareness also includes how others, really having a good understanding of how others view you, as opposed to, because perhaps it's not in alignment with how you see yourself. So think about this in terms of identity versus reputation. Your identity, of course, is the you that you know, but reputation is the you that others know. And that's really important when we're talking about leadership presence. And so here's my next question to the group. And again, you can chat or you can be brave and just come off mute and we'll keep it kind of fun and informal here. You can just kind of shout it out. Why do you think it might be important for you to really understand, have a good understanding of how others view you and your actions? What do you think? Any chats coming through or anybody want to go off mute and just answer? And there's no right or wrong answer here. Just curious on what you think. Why is it important for you to know how others view you?
I think that's important so that you kind of understand yourself a little bit, because you may think that you are doing one thing or another or have this characteristic, but what's interpreted from others can give you feedback on yourself.
Yeah, that's really well said. It can only deepen your understanding of yourself if you see yourself through another's eyes, right? I mean, I do so much work. I mean, Jerry knows this, Jen knows this because we work together on these things, done so much work with leaders on leveraging personality assessments. We use Hogan at Nebraska Medicine. And, that is a personality assessment that kind of spits out a report on reputation. It lets leaders know what their reputation might be in terms of their personality characteristics. And that is really powerful sometimes for leaders to realize that, oh my gosh, how I think I'm showing up is actually not how I'm showing up. It's not perceived the way I'd like it to land sometimes. And so I just really need to be aware of that. It's such a powerful, self-awareness is such a powerful thing. As a matter of fact, we start all of our leadership programs with a healthy dose of a couple of months of really digging into self-awareness before we get into any other parts of our programs, for example. But let me hear, thank you so much for participating and jumping in. I'd love to hear one more voice. Why do you think it's important for you to understand how others view you and your actions and behaviors?
I think it's important because when I think about us as an employee here, we all have outcomes that we need to reach, right? And where I may feel like, hey, I'm really good at reaching outcomes and getting the job done and getting my tasks checked off, other people might see me as maybe pushy and aggressive and bossy, and I might see myself as just a go-getter, right? And so I think that can really affect how you achieve the things you do here at your workplace, because that might change on how people see you, and maybe they won't be as willing to work with you, or maybe they'd be really willing to work with you. Who knows? So I think it's important because everything is a team effort here. So that's important.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. And I think, and that can be hard to face, can't it? I mean, that can be hard to face if we think we're coming across a certain way, but we're realizing it's landing in quite another way. That can be hard to come to terms with. Self-awareness is not easy work. And sometimes it's hard to hear. I'm working with I'll just say an executive now at Nebraska Medicine here. And we're working on brand. And one of the things that I asked this individual to do is to not only do some really deep reflection on their own brand and what they want it to be, but I am going to give this individual an assignment. This person doesn't know this yet, but I will be giving this person an assignment to go out and do some homework by asking individuals in the organization how they view this individual's brand, because that matters. So, we're going to talk a lot more about how to get into that mode of self-awareness and some things that you can do, but do understand there's often a difference between this identity and this reputation, and really taking time to understand how your self-perceptions align or not align with how others see you, and it matters. So let's do an activity. This will be kind of fun. I did this with one other group before, and it worked really well. So I wanted to help you do, excuse me, an activity where it's going to force you to kind of see yourself and analyze yourself and how it could come across. So we're going to do this all on Zoom. So take out a piece of paper, scratch paper, whatever, nothing fancy. And what I want you to do is on your piece of paper, write this T-chart or table or whatever you want to call it with these two headings at the top. So nothing fancy, just go ahead and write this out. Give yourself some rows there because I'll have you fill it in. And once you've got that written out, I'm going to give you just 1 to 2 minutes. It's going to go fast. And I want you, this is going to feel really weird. Okay. Are you ready for this? I want you to stare at yourself on Zoom. I want you just to look at yourself. It's going to feel weird, but look at yourself on Zoom. I want you to spend a good 30 seconds just looking at yourself on Zoom. And then after you just kind of analyze yourself, and of course, this is going to be nonverbals because you're not going to be talking, but I want you to really pay attention to everything you notice. I want you to get really picky about what you're noticing. Notice everything. Notice your facial expression. Notice your clothing. Notice your posture. How are you sitting? And so what I'd love for you to do is just, like I said, stare at yourself for a few seconds and then pick up your pen or pencil. Does anybody have pencils anymore? Your pen, whatever you write with. And I want you to capture some of those nonverbals that you're noticing about yourself on the left. So you're just filling out the left column right now. That's all. Okay. So we're just going to get quiet and I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. I'll give you just another few seconds and notice everything. If you were crossing your arms before you started to write crossing my arms, whatever, just notice everything. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too, well, it was probably really weird to stare at yourself for 2 minutes on Zoom, but hopefully you're going to get something out of this. So you just filled out the left for now. So here's what I'd like you to do just for time's sake. Do as many as you can, but at least do a couple. What I'd love for you to do is pick 2 items that you wrote on the left, at least 2. And just for time's sake, I want you to, in the right column, write how that could possibly come across to others. How could others perceive that particular nonverbal? So for example, if I'm sitting in my seat here like this, slumps, like couldn't care, you know what, I'm just like sitting here like this, presenting to you. Wow, that would be something, right? If I was just kind of kicking back, presenting to you like this. If I note my slumped posture, so maybe I would have written slumped posture, for example. Possible perception could be, if I was presenting to you like that today, oh, Christine doesn't care. She's not super engaged. Gosh, at the very best, maybe she's just super tired, you know, getting over that cold of hers, right? Or maybe if I noticed that I had very good posture, right? And I noted that about myself, maybe others could perceive that as, oh, she's very alert, she's engaged, she's interested, she's really into this, right? So that's what I really want you to do. Take a couple of minutes to pick a couple of those nonverbals, at least a couple, and write how it could be perceived by others, whether you intend it to be or not. I'll give you just 2 minutes. I'll give you another 30 seconds. And then if you, again, I keep calling it brave and courageous because I think it is. It's hard to speak in a big group. I'd love to hear just a couple of examples in a few seconds. Okay, what did you, if you're willing, I just love to hear, and it could be positive too, right? You could state some positive things, possible perceptions. What did you come up with? Any examples that you're willing to share?
Hi, this is Nicole. Oh,
Hi, Nicole.
So this is kind of funny. I have always been told that I have RBF, and I'm not.
Oh no, RBF.
I know. I'm done. And so I look at Amy's like, yeah.
That's hilarious.
And I know there was someone in the organization that had me do one of their 360 assessments, and that was one of the things I put on theirs because they always look angry. And so I looked at myself, because when I look at somebody like watching you talk, I look like I have RBF. And so people may take me as sometimes more aggressive or kind of mean, and I'm not. I'm pretty nice. Yeah, so when I'm thinking, sometimes I look like that.
Yeah, no, gosh, thank you for sharing that. That's so funny that we all know what RBF means. That cracks me up that we all probably knew what that meant as soon as she said that. Anyway, yeah, that's a really good example though, right? Because you're like, but I don't want it to come across that way, but it could come across that way. And so when we think about people who want to approach us or not approach us or work with us or don't work with us, if we don't have the benefit of working with you and knowing you, we might be intimidated or we might think you're not approachable, right? So thank you for sharing that. One more. What else you got?
I think clothing has changed a lot since I've been working from home. So, I wore a dress to work pretty much every day, and I don't wear a dress ever. I try to still wear a sweater or something, but there's Sundays that I may have on a t-shirt and I may have on a sweatshirt depending on the meetings I have. And so I'm very careful that if I look at my schedule and I have meetings that I consider to be important or with people that I consider to be important, then I make sure that I dress appropriately.
Yeah. And that's very smart of you, because I think that's easy to get in that rut of not thinking about that, especially for those of us who work from home. I mean, it's funny. I don't never even wear jewelry anymore. You know what? For you, I put on earrings, you all, and I put on a necklace because you know what? I was presenting and I wanted to look a certain way today. So it is interesting to think about. That's the extra moment of mindfulness in these decisions that we make, because these are decisions that we're making. And that's very smart to be mindful of what does my day look like? Who am I meeting with? And how do I want to present myself? Again, not how I appear like physically, but how do I want to present myself? I love these. So one more if you're willing.
I was going to say, like, on the flip side of that, I don't work from home. So like, I'm like, oh, my background, like hide my background. I know there's like that blur function. I don't know how to do it. So I'm thinking to myself, if I was looking at something like that or, anything, you don't work from home. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have an office, I don't have all of this different kind of stuff. And I'm like, go away, don't come in here, kids, because they're not used to me, being on a Zoom at home. I have a few meetings that I go to, but not very many. So that was kind of one of the things that I noticed from, and you compare it to other people's backgrounds, or things like that. And you're like, oh, how do I do that blur function? And you try to find the setting, and it just didn't happen. So, that's kind of one of the things that on the flip side, I work from home, so I've got, my t-shirt and jeans down type thing. For me, it's like, I still go in and work not from home. So my at-home setup when I do things like this is completely on the flip side of what I feel like other people that, work from home, they've got the setup all, fixed and all that stuff. So anyway.
Well, Jamie, you bring up a really interesting point that I hadn't even thought about is, how we appear, how we present ourselves. But yeah, it's kind of, now I will say, luckily with COVID, people know that not everybody has a perfect space to work in. I think people have been pretty forgiving and, but you still bring up a good point in terms of, it's not just how you present yourself, but your environment and what's around you. And that's all part of how we show up, right? I mean, I know that I've been asked to do a lot of presentations over the years, and I do get a little bit picky around like, no, I'd like to have this or that or present here or there, because I know that's part of my image or reputation. And so you have to consider where you want to present and how you want to present. So yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point I hadn't even thought of. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing those. I think it's just a moment of self-reflection, and we don't often get a chance to, with Zoom we do these days, but to really look at ourselves and really make some determinations around, here's how I mean to show up. Is that really how I'm showing up? Is that how it's landing? And so I think you get the point there. And I will say these are all indicators, by the way, of our leadership presence. All these choices that we make, all these examples that you just gave, they either detract from or they add to your leadership presence, which is incredibly important. And with practice, I will say we can learn to increase our self-awareness regarding our thoughts, our actions, our feelings, and even our conversations with others. So we just did one activity just now, right, in this little table to help you increase your self-awareness or kind of whet your appetite for it. What are some other ways? And again, I'd like to hear from the group. Maybe you can chat this one. Go ahead and chat and I'll ask help to monitor the chat. What are some other ways that you can help yourself to increase your own self-awareness? What are some other things that you can do to increase your self-awareness? What else? There's one big one, but you might have lots of good ideas. So maybe just tell me what's coming through the chat.
Be here now, ask for advice during one-on-ones, ask for feedback from trusted friends and colleagues, ask for direct feedback. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you definitely hit the nail on the head with where I was going with that one, which is to ask for feedback. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can increase our own self-awareness, but asking for feedback is definitely a big one. So often, like I've said 2 or 3 times now, we are just blind. We're blind to it. We are blind to how others perceive our behavior. So ask for it often. I don't know if you follow David Rock. He's amazing. He's a really interesting guy. He's a leadership expert and neuroscientist. And David Rock says that we actually should be making a habit of asking for feedback at least 3 times a day. Asking good, specific, open-ended questions to get insightful feedback. Find mentors who I like to call your truth tellers, your loving critics, I like to call them as well, who will give you honest, open, candid feedback and guidance. And by the way, if you are lucky enough, and I do say lucky enough to get feedback because a lot of people do not like to give it. They just don't like to give it. They get uncomfortable. They don't want to hurt people's feelings, so they just won't give you any. If you are lucky enough to get feedback, take it in, reflect on it, and then execute on personal changes that you wish to make. And, I put this next slide together just to kind of get you thinking about, oh my gosh, you have so many feedback sources that you may not be capitalizing on right now, that you might not be leveraging right now. I mean, my goodness, the feedback sources are all around you. So take advantage of those if you haven't already thought to do so. It's all around you. Okay, so we have talked about leadership presence in terms of having exceptional self-awareness. I'd like to move on to our second aspect that I'd like to cover, which is having a growth mindset instead of what we call a fixed mindset. Those with a growth mindset, or rather fixed mindset, we'll start with fixed. Those with a fixed mindset believe that they are either smart or talented, or they're not. There's no way to change that. It is predetermined. There is just nothing they can do about it. As a result, those with a fixed mindset actually tend to learn less than they could because they tend to stick to what they know. And they also tend to shy away from challenges. People with fixed mindsets get very frustrated pretty easily and they tend to give up. And if they do fail at something, they tend to tell themselves, well, that's just because I can't do it. I just never will be able to do it. I just cannot learn to play music and I never will, that kind of thing. Or they make excuses to rationalize away their failure. I really would have passed that test if I had just had a better teacher, right? So it's really this external locus making constructive feedback, because how do they see it? They see it as a personal attack rather than as an opportunity to improve. Now, that's fixed mindset. On the other hand, those with a growth mindset believe that their success depends on time and effort. They believe that their skills and their intelligence can be improved with persistence. They embrace challenges. They persist through obstacles. They learn from criticism, and they believe that they can achieve whatever they want. I sent you a short quiz, or I asked the organizers to send out a short quiz so that you could see where you fell on the continuum between growth and fixed mindset. So hopefully you all had a chance to do that quiz. I love that little quiz. It's short and easy and sweet, and it really gives you a glimpse into where you tend to fall, more fixed or more growth. And I'm not going to ask you to share your score. I'm not even going to ask for any discussion around it because that's private and that's yours to reflect on. But I did want you to take it because I wanted you to hear me say this today. Here's the good news. If you have more of a fixed mindset on that continuum, doesn't matter. You can change it. You can change it. Your mindset is not set in stone. It never will be set in stone. You can change it whenever and however you want. It is 100% within your control. And I will say there are not too many things in this life that you can say are 100% within your control, but that's one of them. You can change your mindset. I'd like you to watch, it's about 8 minutes, so it's a little long, but it's really good. He's a very animated presenter. I want you to watch a video with me about growth mindset and the powerful impact it can make, not just on your work and your leadership presence, but on your life. So we'll watch this together. Hopefully the sound, we tested it, hopefully it'll come through just fine. And then we'll talk a little bit more about growth mindset. I'm going to pause just for a second to make sure you can all hear it. Can you hear it? Okay.
World of sports or education, you've most likely heard of the term growth mindset. It's a concept that's sweeping the world and changing and improving the way that people learn. This powerful idea has been pushed forward by Stanford professor and best-selling author Carol Dweck.
For decades, I've been studying why some people succeed while people who are equally talented do not. And over the years, I've discovered that people's mindsets play a crucial role in this process.
These mindsets are really important when it comes to learning. Her work has uncovered 2 ways of thinking about skill and development. Some people have what's called a fixed mindset. They believe that skills and intelligence are set and you either have them or you don't. That some people are just naturally good at things while others are not. In short, they believe that you are not in control of your abilities. Other people have what's called a growth mindset, and they believe that skills and intelligence are grown and developed. So people who are good at something are good because they built that ability, and people who aren't are not good because they haven't done the work. In short, they believe that you are in control of your abilities. Really, the core idea here is people with a fixed mindset believe that skills are born. People with a growth mindset believe that skills are built. People with a fixed mindset believe that you can't or don't have to learn and grow. And people with a growth mindset do believe in their capacity to learn and grow. Dweck's work shows that mindsets have a major influence on people's ability to learn, and that people who utilize this growth mindset tend to learn, grow, and achieve more over time than people with a fixed. Growth mindset really creates a solid foundation for great learning. And because of its power, companies, sports teams, and schools from all over the world are implementing this into their culture. Over the years, we've worked with a ton of amazing groups to help instill this within their culture. We're talking Fortune 500 companies, lots of colleges, lots of high schools, and even a few prisons who are working to build growth mindset into their reentry program. What I'm trying to say is this is bigger than one study or one TED Talk. This is a powerful concept that's helping lots of different people in lots of different places. Now, the reason it's so important and powerful is it is the foundation for learning. And if you understand this, no matter what you build on that foundation, it will be more powerful. But to really implement and run with this concept, we need to zoom in and look at the nuts and the bolts of it. We need to talk about what it actually is and how it actually works. Through years of work, Dweck and her team have uncovered sort of the defining characteristics of the two mindsets. This table really illustrates the contrast between the two. The first big characteristic we need to talk about is belief. Again, people with this fixed mindset believe that skills are born and therefore they can't or don't have to learn. People with a growth mindset believe that skills are built, therefore they can learn. The second major characteristic is focus. People in a fixed mindset tend to focus on performance and outcomes and results. In other words, their main focus, their main concern becomes how they look, and more specifically, to not look bad. People with a growth mindset tend to focus more on the process of getting better, of learning and growing. These mindsets and these characteristics have a huge influence on our ability to learn, and now we start to see why. Let's look at like the 4 key ingredients to growth: effort, challenges, mistakes, and feedback. The research shows that when somebody is in a fixed mindset, they look at effort as a negative thing, as something that you do when you're not good enough. They also don't see the value or purpose of putting in effort. They've been shown to back down and avoid challenging situations. They get really discouraged and worked up when they make mistakes. And when somebody with a fixed mindset receives feedback from a parent, a teacher, a coach, or a friend, they get defensive, they take it personally, and they don't see the value or purpose of the feedback. So in other words, people with this fixed mindset actually avoid and shy away from these 4 key ingredients to growth. Dweck and her team have shown that when people enter a growth mindset, they look at effort as a useful thing, as an important part of the learning process. They're actually more likely to embrace challenges and persevere and work through them. They see mistakes as learning opportunities, and when they receive feedback, they actually appreciate it and use it. Now, the fascinating and important part of this table is to connect the dots between these key characteristics of the two mindsets and our actions and behaviors towards learning. Let's look at the fixed mindset side first. They actually shy away from putting in effort because they don't believe that they can change. They give up when they're met with a challenge and things get hard because they don't want to look bad. So in their mind, the challenge becomes a threat, and because they don't believe that they can change. They hate making mistakes and are discouraged by mistakes because if you're making mistakes, you're not looking good. And they don't see the value or purpose of feedback because they don't believe in their capacity to grow. So in one way or the other, every single one of these actions is a byproduct of these characteristics. And the same is true on the growth mindset side. They see the value and purpose of effort because they believe in their capacity to grow. They're more likely to take on a challenge and persevere through it because they believe that they can grow and because they're focused on the opportunity to do that. So they frame a challenge as an opportunity to get better. And by focusing on the process and believing in their capacity to grow, they're more likely to understand how important mistakes are in this process. And when they receive feedback from a parent, teacher, coach, or friend, they're more receptive to this because their focus is on getting better and because they believe that that information can help them grow and they have the capacity to do so. 2 key points with this table. First, you're not just one or the other. This is a spectrum. And in different times, on different days, in different situations, you might be in a growth, while other times you'll slip into a fixed. But now that we understand how it works and we understand the character, to identify where you're at on this spectrum and more specifically, the cause of that mindset. Is it our beliefs or is it our focus? Second, yes, these actions of learning are great and they're definitely behaviors that we want. But we have to understand that they come from our mindsets. So to create a great culture for learning, it's about zooming in on beliefs and focus and creating a real growth mindset, which is one of the most important things we can do.
All right. Okay, I love sharing that video. I think it is incredibly powerful. Hopefully there's lots to kind of chew on there and reflect on. I do want to give you 3 more things that you can do if you really like this concept of growth mindset and you want to challenge yourself to learn more about it. There's really 3 more things that we can do. The first one we really already talked about, but I would be remiss if I didn't put it here. We talked about this, ask for feedback. I think about it just like your presenter in the video did, thinking about it through the world of sports, right? Even the best pros, the best professionals at the top of their game ask for feedback all the time from their trainers, from their coaches, from other experts, from their peers. Now, number two, I'm going to give you a riddle. And I'm going to see if you can guess what number two, the second thing that you can do to help you cultivate a growth mindset. Here's the riddle. I think a couple of you, Jerry, I know has seen this. I think Jerry's seen this, but nobody else probably has seen this. So here's a riddle. So Jerry can't answer because he's seen this in one of our Leadership Advantage events. But this is a riddle about what? A prison you feel safe in, yet never quite happy. Whenever you try to leave, it only grows bigger. What is it? Any guesses? It's a tough riddle. Any chats coming in or anybody want to go off mute?
Someone in the chat said comfort zone.
Oh, so smart, whoever said that. Oh, yes, it is your comfort zone. That is a riddle about comfort zone. So that's number two, getting out of your comfort zone. He really kind of did address this in the video. You know, by design, we are wired to stay in our comfort zone. Why? Because it's comfortable, it's cozy, it feels good, right? We know what to expect. There's no fear there, they're knowns. And like I said, although that feels good, we're just not learning or growing when we're in our comfort zone. But when we get outside of our comfort zone and stretch ourselves, we grow. And number three might be something that's a little unexpected. It's really this. Surround yourself with people that inspire you. Who you work with is just as important as what you work on and where you work at. If your peers don't inspire you, you're not in a growth environment. Okay, so we have talked about two of the three things regarding leadership presence and how to cultivate that so far. A deepened self-awareness, having a growth mindset, and the third that I want to introduce you here today is something that I'm calling having a bias for action. You know, I came across an article a few months ago that I thought was so powerful, and I thought it would be perfect to share with you today. So I'm going to read you, it's short, I'm going to read you a short excerpt from an article on this topic, having a bias for action, by Sanjeev Agrawal. Sanjeev is the president and chief operating officer at the leading healthcare predictive analytics company based in Silicon Valley. He says leaders with leadership presence have a relentless bias for action. So here's the short excerpt. Gandhi dedicated his life to free India from British rule. Nobody gave him the formal power or authority to do so. Nobody even asked him to do so. He saw a problem, a wrong, and decided to act vehemently yet peacefully to right it. He started as a one-man army and inspired millions of people to join him. He had leadership presence. Every single day, every single minute, we see problems around us. We can either ignore them or do something about them. By design, we are selective about what we act upon and what we ignore. Some of us tend to act more, and some of us tend to ignore more. Everything you see around you is a result of someone doing something to make it happen. Companies like Google, Facebook, Netflix, and Amazon, which have changed the way we live, are starting us with one difference: an extraordinary motivation to solve problems and an ambition to match. No one believed them initially, but everyone followed them eventually. But you don't have to be a Mark Zuckerberg. You could be the most junior person on your team, but by having an irrational bias toward action, you are being a leader. You have leadership presence. Every time you go out of your way to fix that bug, add more test cases, talk to more customers, find more leads, or close more deals, you are being a leader. Every time you inspire people with action, you are being a leader. Every time you make an attempt to own and solve a problem, you are being a leader. And every time you do something to help others around you, you are being a leader. So have a bias toward action. If you want to do something, fix something, then act. If someone else is doing something inspiring, then help. You have nothing to lose. Do it. and don't expect anything in return, and don't think that it makes you entitled to anything. I love that article. I love that article. It is so powerful. It sums everything up that I would want to say about having a bias for action and how critically important that is to your leadership presence. Remember that quote I gave you at the beginning by Woody Allen, half of success, 80% of success actually is just showing up. Yeah, showing up with a bias for action. So let's do a quick exercise. This is going to be a real quick one to get you thinking about your own bias toward action or inaction. So take out that same piece of paper. Maybe it's just the same one that you made the little T chart on earlier. Just pull that back out. And I'm going to give you a question to reflect on, just a few seconds to reflect on it. And then I want you to write it down. And then I'm going to give you a challenge around it. You can accept my challenge or not, but I'm still going to give you the challenge. So here's my question. What's one thing that you didn't take action on last week? Or maybe it's Thursday, so maybe earlier this week. And if you're being honest with yourself, you should have if you'd had a bias for action. Think about it. Think about one thing last week, this week. What could you have done? Write it down. Do me a little favor, just write it, just jot it down. I'll give you a few seconds to think about that. Jotting it down, that's the easy part, by the way. Okay, hopefully you've jotted something down. Hopefully you had something in mind that you could have done, you should have done, had you had a bias for action. So that's, like I said, the easy part, to jot it down. Here's my challenge to you, take it or leave it. If it's appropriate timing, when I'm done with my presentation in a few minutes here, go do it. Go do it. Go do that thing that you should have or could have done last week. And if not today, then do it as soon as it makes sense to do it. And if that moment has passed, then carpe diem on one thing this week to go do, to practice having a bias for action. It's a simple challenge, but it could be a powerful one. So in closing, and I want to save a few minutes for questions and insights, as I mentioned, but in closing, I would say this to just summarize. If you want to stand out, and I think you need to in today's world, right? There's so much noise, there's so much going on around us. If you want to stand out as a professional, then develop your leadership presence. It's critical to our success, but I will tell you, I believe it is rare because it takes intention and deliberate effort to critically face ourselves, our mindsets, and our actions or inactions. And you don't need a leadership title to develop your leadership presence. But what you do need is self-awareness, a growth mindset, and a relentless bias for action. So, perfect timing. We've got about 8 minutes, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a few minutes at the end. I'd love to open it up. I'd love to take your questions. And I also wanted, so maybe we'll start with a couple minutes of questions, but I'd really love to end with your key takeaways and your insights. Anything that you heard today that really resonated with you and that you want to take forward with you. But I will start with your questions. And maybe Kelsey can help me to monitor the chat, or you can unmute, and I'm happy to spend a few minutes just chatting.
While everyone's kind of, there were a couple of things that came through just on materials. One, if we can get the PowerPoint, which I'm guessing that's okay to share that.
Yes, of course.
Someone did ask specifically for the link to the article on the growth or the bias for action one that you shared. So
yes, absolutely. I'm happy to share all my resources. You bet. I'll get that to the organizers, and then you can perhaps push that out. Any other comments or questions before I ask for insights?
I have a quick question. So, let's say everyone here is in the growth mindset, and I think about, again, working with teams, and any advice for working with people who are maybe of mixed, either growth mindset or fixed, or maybe how to motivate those types of people who are maybe a little bit more fixed mindset?
Yes, that's a really good question. It's such a good question because often when we're in a growth mindset, we just expect and want everybody else around us to be as well. And we can get very frustrated. I know I do. But we all ebb and flow from growth to fixed as well. So we have to be a little, have some grace with people sometimes. So here's what I would offer you as advice. Actually, first a comment and then some advice. First of all, we really can't, you cannot motivate another human being. They have to choose that for themselves. So it's always interesting, we use the phrase a lot, how, and I do this too in the leadership work that I do. How can we motivate leaders? How can we do this? I cannot motivate you. You choose that for yourself, as I said. But the advice I would give, and it's a skill for sure, so it's something to cultivate and practice, is to ask curious questions. So nobody likes to be told, well, why are, you're being very close-minded about this. Why aren't you being more open about, that is probably not the way I would approach somebody that's having a fixed mindset. But what I would do is ask some really curious questions to get them to pause and think, and perhaps then become open to a different perspective. If you think about it, let me put it this way. If I tell you something, if you are in a fixed mindset mood, it's kind of like punching me in the face. What are you going to do? You're going to punch me back, right? But if I ask you a question, it completely triggers a different part of the brain. It causes a pause. It causes a curiosity or inquisitiveness. And it actually causes me to want to stop and want to maybe help or answer your question or think about it differently. So that's why I'm always going to suggest a curious question rather than a tell. Because people, maybe don't always respond well to a tell, especially if they're kind of in that fixed mindset place. Is that helpful? Maybe that would be a good approach to take to those who might be finding themselves in a fixed mindset in that moment.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Any other questions?
Is there a most common theme that you find with leaders, that what they need to work on?
Oh my goodness, that is such a good question. I don't know, not a theme, but lots of themes. A few of them, gosh, I could maybe rattle off the top of. I do think one of them is self-awareness, right? Maybe a theme around really growing in their self-awareness of who they are as a leader. I do find with many leaders, they don't always take the time when they're newer leaders to have a point of view and take time to clarify expectations and create some really good ground rules for working together. And so then when problems arise, they have nothing to anchor back to. And so I really work a lot with leaders to, what is your leadership style? Who do you want to be as a leader? What is your leadership point of view? What else? I think, here's one I'll tell you, and this is actually very prevalent. I'm surprised I didn't say it first. Confidence. It's hard to be a leader these days. And I think confidence is something that a lot of people struggle with, but in a leadership role, you find yourself on stage and you find yourself in the spotlight. And remember the word I gave you at the beginning of the session by Sylvia Hewlett, gravitas. You almost have to develop some gravitas, some confidence to really be an effective leader. So I think that's another one that a lot of leaders struggle with. Good question. What about actually, if there's any other, I don't want to cut you short, any other questions? And we'll spend the last just couple minutes for insights and takeaways. I love the questions.
What is your recommendation for time management when you're trying to develop your presence as a leader, yet you're doing a lot of other things as well?
Yeah, that's another really good question. When you think about your leadership presence and 80% of success is showing up, that 80%, it better be on your blue chips. And blue chips is a culture concept, hopefully that you're all familiar with. Highest priority items. I think when it comes to time management, really being very mindful about what are my goals, what are my team's goals, what are the organization's goals, and really being intentional about showing up in those places where you can add the most value, where you have your own point of view, where you can add your skill and expertise. That's where you're going to naturally show up with more leadership presence because you have something to offer, you have something to give. And those are really kind of your personal blue chips. So that's a great question because we all have only so much time, energy, and effort to give. But that's what I would say in terms of really focusing on that time management. All right, let's just take these last couple of minutes. Like I said, it's a big charge for me to hear from you. What resonated? What are your nuggets? What are your takeaways from today's session? If I could hear from just 2 or 3 of you.
For me, I like to try to tie these things into like zero harm and culture topics because I feel like they're always greatly related. And there's a few things that stood out to me. So you were mentioning ask curious questions. That's one thing that comes straight from our zero harm. Being here now, that's one topic that I saw. And one of the things, so one of the big things for here is self-awareness. And I got a poster right here that says, what shadow do you cast? So I think just those types of things, trying to tie those in together, I think is really important. Understanding where you are, what shadow you cast, and how people perceive you. That's kind of one of the big things. I think changing your mindset around those things is important as you grow as a leader. So, or
Yeah.
aspires to be a leader.
Thank you, Jerry. Yeah, casting the shadow. That's a really powerful one. That's great. Thank you, Jerry. Who else? A takeaway or a nugget.
On the chat here, we have to ask for more feedback and truly listen to what I'm being told.
Perfect. I love, yes, the feedback. I'm glad someone said feedback. That's such a big theme, I think, for my session today that I would love for you to take away. And Nicole, you had something too, yes?
And I know we're out of time, but I was just going to say, when we were talking, you were talking about, the feedback thing. So I lead a lot of meetings, and I have trouble with trying to figure out how to read people and trying to bring them in because I run 2 programs. So I started asking for feedback from people. And one of the things that I learned is that when I ask the group or I ask someone a question, I keep talking. And I never let, look at Amy's laughing at me. She's probably been in one of my meetings. And they said, if you ask a question, stop talking. Let it be silent until somebody responds. And I consciously now will tell myself to shut up and let someone else talk, because I think if it's silent, that's a bad thing, and it's not. So that's my takeaway, is that helped me a lot.
Nicole, kudos to you. You could have gone your whole life and never have known that about yourself because you didn't ask for the feedback and nobody was courageous or kind and loving enough to tell you that. So kudos to you. That is a great way to end. I really appreciate your participation and engagement. I always love the invite to this group. Thanks to the organizers who were very flexible with me over the last week as I was recovering. And thank you all so much.
I know we're out of time. Thank you again, Christine. Very much appreciate it. Hopefully everyone can take something away from this thought-provoking event that we've got, and maybe even the quiz to take some things and put into action. Real quick, one quick announcement. It was mentioned earlier at the very beginning. I forgot to mention the ice skate event for tomorrow has been postponed. We will be doing that again in January, so more information on that. But thank you again. Hopefully everyone takes something good from here and enjoy your day.